Well, hello and a very good afternoon, good evening, good morning, depending on where in the world you are tuning in from. My name is Adrian Reed and a very warm welcome to this BA Community webinar. And what a popular topic it is. Judging by the number of registrations we've had, this is a topic that is very much the front of people's minds. We've got attendees joining from all around the world. So if you are tuning in live, if you're just joining and you're tuning in live, why not just use the chat to say where you're from? It's always interesting to know where people are sort of tuning in from. And no wonder it's a popular topic, because who wouldn't want to talk about influence? Now, as business analysts and change professionals, we often have to influence without authority. And although you or I might not consider ourselves to be salespeople in the sort of strict sense of the word, we've probably all had to influence someone. We've probably had to sell an idea or sell a project, even if we're not out there knocking on doors and selling products and selling services. So a question that was in the back of my mind is, what if we could learn from the world of sales? And I recently came across a fantastic book, and it's one that I would absolutely recommend you get your hands on. In actual fact, I found it as an audio book first. So if you're an Audible subscriber, you can get it on there. But I liked it so much, I got the audio book, and then I bought the actual book, which is The Accidental Salesperson by Chris Lytle. And I did that always slightly scary thing in just approaching Chris, having never met him before, asking whether he would join us for a webinar. And I'm really pleased to say that, that he said yes. So Chris, thank you very much for being here today.
Well, Adrian, thank you. Thanks for buying the book and the audio, and for reading it and for recommending it. I appreciate that.
No, you're most welcome. You're most welcome. And I should say, before we kick off, as well as being the best-selling author of The Accidental Salesperson, Chris has also trained over 250,000 people. I was trying to get my head around that number, Chris. That's a huge number. And has an online training resource at instantSalesTraining.com, which is really good, and I'd recommend you take a look at. And I particularly like, you give a fantastic warning that education without action is entertainment. And I was thinking about the webinar today, thinking I think it's going to be educational, entertaining, and with lots of action. So yep. Thanks again, Chris, for joining us.
I always tell my seminar audiences, I hope you like the seminar, but I'm here for your improvement, not for your enjoyment.
Yeah. It's a good mantra. It's a good mantra, yeah. Because unless something changes, then it's it's back to reverting to type. So. Fantastic. For those of you who are attending live, do remember there is a question and answer, a Q&A function. So if you have a question for Chris as we go along, do type it in the Q&A, and I will pick up as many questions as we can as we go along. And if you want to chat with the other people who are there live, feel free to put something in the chat, where you're from or whatever. So Chris, let's kick off. And as you know, I know we've talked about in preparing for this session, many people tuned in today wouldn't consider themselves to be salespeople, or they wouldn't describe themselves as such. But one thing that really struck a chord with me when we spoke was how you said, if you're in business, you're in sales, and that's been going around in my head ever since. And what would you say the advantages to non-sales professionals, such as business analysts, project managers, etc., of learning sales techniques would be? And would you say it helps with influence as well?
I mean, we're all trying to get something, get budget, get okay on a project or consultation, whatever it is. Somebody has to be persuaded. But I want to just start with techniques versus behaviors, because I don't use any techniques, but listening, asking good questions, then listening, proposing, and really understanding what selling is. And you've got a trainer over there in Britain that his name is Phil M. Jones, and you can watch his YouTube videos. Phil M. Jones, and he gave the best definition of selling I'd ever heard. He said, selling is earning the right to make a recommendation. And all you have to do is get in position. You don't have a right to tell people what they need unless you've asked them some questions. We call it discovery or needs analysis. But I think that's the way to think about it. And then think about behaviors. We were talking about Neil Rackham right before.
Yeah.
He wrote a book called Spin Selling, and he says sales success is created by these little building blocks called behaviors. So it's, all the little things that salespeople do is prospect and write thank you notes and all these crazy things, but everything that makes an impression on the client.
Fantastic. So very, very broad discipline, very broad set of ideas there. And as you say, we're all influencing someone at some point.
Yeah, I've got a very good friend, colleague, and has been a competitor, but we're collaborating on this project, a video project. But Darren Steenberg is his name, and he tells his audiences, until you can say to the client or the person you're trying to persuade these words, 6 words, based on what you've told me, you really aren't selling, you're just pitching. So there's a huge difference. And based on what you told me, and building credibility and listening and knowing what the needs are and articulating the needs from the client's standpoint is what selling really is.
Yeah, and that's really interesting, Chris, because that expression of based on what you've told me. If I think about what I do in my job as a business analyst, it's very much about understanding people's needs and understanding not just and I'd be interested to see if this resonates with you from a sales perspective, but understanding not only like their explicit needs, what they say they want, but also their implied needs, the needs that they have but don't know that they have yet.
Right. Or the need, or what they're going to need in the future to stay competitive or relevant. So anytime we can get them to think about a better future instead of the problems right now, good things can happen.
Yeah, definitely. So, Chris, one similarity that BAs and other change practitioners have with salespeople is the need to form relationships and ultimately influence people, as we've sort of alluded to at the moment. And I suppose a salesperson would be looking to close a sale, right? I mean, ultimately, although I guess that's that closing a sale is often the beginning of a relationship, but a non-salesperson might be selling an idea or a project. And one thing that you talk about in your book is different levels of relationship from level 1 to 4. And this really stuck with me. So I wonder whether you could sort of talk a little bit about that spectrum.
I think we're talking about the chart.
Yeah.
And what I would invite people to do, just look at the objective and then read left to right and see how the levels evolve. Level 1 being kind of a rookie, level 4 being an ultimate professional. I'll be quiet. I'm going to be quiet for 45 seconds.
I've seen this before, and I'm still reading through it with interest, Chris. It's yeah, there's a lot in here that's relevant for project professionals, Chris.
And just the way you prepare for a meeting, what you're worried about, or you want them to like you, or you want to be a resource to them. I think I've got another. I have another.
And in fact, that whole idea of a resource or an outside insider is something that often within the business analysis community, we talk about becoming a trusted advisor.
Yes.
And we might have an internal client, but it's still like we're an outside insider to their to their department. So I really like the idea of like benchmarking where we are with a relationship and figuring out where the gaps could be.
And when I do a live training session, I will ask the salespeople in the room, can you see yourself at different levels with different clients? And they go, yeah. And I used to say there were level 1, 2, 3, and 4 salespeople, but then I realized there are level 1, 2, 3, and 4 relationships. And really your last meeting is a relationship. Now, I'll tell a quick story. I maybe have 2 quick stories about this. Shortly after the book came out, I got a call from a meeting planner, and she said, my client read your book and is thinking about bringing you out to the annual sales meeting. And I said, well, tell me about what the client needs me to talk about and how he wants the salespeople to be different after I leave. He says, look, I'm the meeting planner. I'm going to look at 7 videos and pick 2 speakers. You want to play? And I said, yeah. And when I went over to ship my video and my price sheet and my bio, I said, I just had a level 1 relationship or a level 1 meeting, and I wrote the book. So you can strive for things that are higher up in the chart. Sometimes the client won't let you do it, which brings me to one other story. I was doing some work for United Van Lines in St. Louis. It was their university. And excuse me. This guy came up to me and he said, you won't believe what happened, Chris. I read your book. I copied your chart, and I had this real tough client, and he was always just grinding my prices down. And I didn't want to do that. And he just wouldn't let me in. And I brought him a copy of the chart, and I said, what kind of relationship do you want to have with me? He said, you want me to tell you right now? He said, no, just read this. I could do so much more for you than you're letting me do. I could give you I've got data, I've got other things I could bring to the table if you just let me in a little bit. He said 2 weeks later, it was a whole different client, as the client realized he could have a different relationship with a salesperson.
And again, so much of this resonates, Chris, with even though I've never had a sales role as such, because as a project professional, sometimes you get brought in and it's like, just get it done. Like we just want a warm body in a chair to do the work. Whereas actually nudging up that chart and saying, we want to be the trusted advisor. We want you to come to us to ask, we want to work with you and partner with you to help you get the outcomes that you want. We don't want you kind of deciding what you want and then just saying, well, I want this resource and that resource. It's kind of like the difference, I suppose, between just like body shopping and actually having that really, really mutually respectful long-term partnership, which is definitely the best.
Well, the long-term relationship really is more important than a sale, because if you only make one sale and don't get repeat business, and it's not very fulfilling, and it's a lot of work. And you want to get referrals, you want to get information. Relationships are important.
Yeah, and reflecting on that, Chris, one thing I've struggled to do with in my career sometimes is getting people interested in what I do. So like other than business analysts, very few people get excited about business analysis. And I can understand why that is. But if there was a stakeholder, a customer or team that I wanted to, get a better relationship with, so I can earn that opportunity to tell them more about what I do, or earn that opportunity to get closer to them, what would you recommend? Well,
there's nothing like a coffee or taking someone to lunch. I don't know if people do that anymore. It seems to be a lost art. It's to a lot of Zoom. One of my early influences said, seed the client. And you saw that little red square or rectangle around, be a source of business information. And if you can summarize an article, or you send an article, but it shouldn't be a 43-page PDF. If you can send a summary of an article, or 1 page of something, or you make your own checklist. I think I will show, this is what I did early in my career, I'll show this real quick. One of my employees said, we should send out Christmas cards. And I said, I'm not going to send out a Christmas card because we were specializing in the radio advertising business. I'm not going to send it out unless it hangs on people's walls. Everybody sends out Christmas cards. I don't want to send out the typical Christmas card. So I came up with Chris Lytle's Christmas lists, and you're making a list and checking it twice. And this is the second page of the and you're on our list, and all of our employees signed it. And then as 1994 unfold this card for a free seminar you hang on the wall. And so what they saw next was,
oh, wow.
Information and quotes on business and advertising. And I had a couple little commercials on the right, but I've gone into places 6 and 7 years later, and that's hanging on a bulletin board in a sales office. So, you want to get in front of people with some expertise. And that's what I did. That's not the only way to do it. But, and we did it, we did it. So it worked so well that we quit doing it about 10 years into it. But
wow. Well, yeah. And I guess the thing is that almost reminds the contact that you're there, and provides them something of value. That idea of seeding, and I can imagine again, as a business analyst, quite often we will be party to information that might be relevant for some of our stakeholders, and actually just taking the time to let them know about it, become that like trusted source of insight, right? The kind of person that filters, because it's funny, isn't it, Chris? I don't know if you find this, but I find there's so much content out there now. The problem isn't a lack of insight, it's like curation, it's finding the good stuff. And if I guess if we can become the curators of the good stuff, then that's a winner.
Yeah, I mean, if you say, excuse me, hey Chris, here's a link to a great YouTube video on some subject. Fast forward to the 10-minute mark and watch the next 3 minutes. It's got some really good insights in it. And it's so easy because you found it, and if you liked it, share it with 10 people. And that's what I've done on Instant Sales Training website. And I don't know if you even checked that out yet, but
yeah.
I have an extra credit video section where I took 60 of my favorite YouTube videos on business management, advertising, sales, prospecting, getting the appointment, and just put them up in a free space, so people don't have to stumble on them. They're right there.
Yeah.
No, I watch 10 to get one good one.
Wow. Okay, that's real curation. So. Fantastic. No, and there's lots of good stuff on that side, so it's definitely worth people checking that out. And I suppose, Chris, one thing that underpins a trusting relationship, these kinds of mutually beneficial relationships that we're talking about, is credibility. And it also strikes me that possibly something that in sales is a challenge as it is in business analysis and projects is building that credibility. Because I might be working with someone I've never worked with before, got to work with them on a project. How do I prove credibility? How do I, what should I be doing in advance of that meeting or during that first meeting to really hit home?
Well, obviously, you research, you read the website, but what I like to do is I read the client's trade magazine website.
Interesting.
And I was really I had a huge client, and the International Car Wash Association brought me in to speak. But when I would read Auto Laundry News before I went to call on my client, and I said, do you use cheater wax? And I was using his jargon. And Jeff, the manager, he said, come into my office. Says, we don't say that out here. I said, well, why not? He said, because that's the wax we put in the water. Even if people don't buy the $3, $5 hot wax, So why do you do that? He said, because it makes the blowers work better if there's a little wax in the water, and we save about $20,000 a winter by putting a nickel's worth of wax in there. Wow. So now we're having this whole conversation about how he makes money, how he saves money, because I simply used one of his jargon words. I wasn't an expert in it, but I had done some research. And of course, it's in the book, and you probably ran across the magic phrase, in preparing for this meeting.
Yep.
I read this, did this, checked your website, talked to 3 of your customers, whatever you did, don't do it and then not tell anybody you did it.
Yeah, so. and it's interesting because that's one of the real like immediate takeaways I took from the book was, often I do a lot of prep for meetings with stakeholders and I don't really tell them about it, and that phrase, in preparing for this meeting, I had a look on your departmental intranet site, and I've got a good idea of what this might be about. So I've got a few questions, but I've done my research. It's like that can go a long way because people know you're not just wasting their time.
And by the way, I know that Mary is the chief operating officer. Should she be in this meeting as well?
Yeah. Prove on your stakeholder research as well.
So. Get the people that need to be in the meeting. And so there's all kinds of benefits of pre-meeting preparation. And literally, if you prepare for 15 minutes, you prepare for 14 minutes more than most reps.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because another thing, so I have, as you see, sticky tabs all over the book, but one of the areas, I think as with all things, you kind of adapt them for your own use, but I loved your pre-meeting planner, right? Which is a kind of a really interesting idea. And one of the things I really liked, I can't remember which number it was, number 3, can I give the prospect or stakeholder a pre-meeting assignment, right? And I thought that was really interesting, right? Because actually, but it makes sense, like, okay, can you have a think about, like in my world as a business analyst, can you have a think about the top 3 pain points with the current process? Because then and if you've got any data about that, can you bring it to the meeting? And it's amazing because people will normally, as long as it's not a huge assignment, people will normally like come, then I'm prepared and they're prepared, and it's like we've probably cut a longer meeting down to a much more concise and engaging one.
And they've thought about the meeting at least once or twice in between the time you made the appointment and the time you showed up. Because the worst thing that can happen is you walk into a client's office and they go, "Oh, it's you." I forgot about this. And it happens.
Yeah, absolutely. So staying front of mind, and again, I suppose that all starts with the seeding. So at the very beginning of the relationship, so they've maybe even got something around that, or they're getting updates. They're starting to get that perspective of you as a person who knows the industry. Then when I meet them, then they've got that. So it's like incrementally building credibility. So another thing, Chris, in business analysis, we talk a lot about requirements analysis, but in sales and in the book, I understand that the term is needs analysis, typically from a sales perspective. So what would your key tips be for understanding a customer or stakeholder's needs?
Well, now we're calling it the discovery process. And it used to be you would sit down with them for an hour and ask them a lot of questions. Excuse me. You'd sit and ask them a lot of questions, and nobody will sit still for an hour to ask, all an hour's worth of questions. So you discover this and you say, I've learned a few things about you, but I need to ask you about 3-4 questions. Would that be okay? And there is a kind of question that I teach, and I learned it from a sales trainer named Charles Brennan, but it's called a 3-level question, where you make a factual statement based on some other research. According to J.R. Power, the average age of a person who buys a BMW is 52. I know that my 30-year-old niece drives a Chevy Volt or Chevy, Cruze. And I was wondering, I'm talking to the car dealer, I was wondering how you target your advertising dollars and to what demographic you really focus on. So I give them a statement from a trusted source. I make an observation from my life, and then I ask the question. And now no one's ever asked them that. They'll ask them, what's keeping you up at night? And that's so cliched now that you got to do something different.
Yeah, so it's about, I suppose there's an element of, again, and it comes back to this understanding, putting ourselves in their shoes, finding a factual statement or some piece of insight to really nail the question to, and then almost laddering up and down from that question to use that as a trigger to sort of get to their explicit or implicit needs.
Yeah, because see, people have automatic responses. They've told us a million times to different people, and they have their snappy answers to everything. But if you ask them something that they have to think about and dig a little bit, then it's a different conversation, a longer conversation, and they remember you differently than they remember other consultants, salespeople, anybody.
Yeah,
business advisors.
A bit of a curveball, Chris, but would you have any advice for situations where perhaps a client has a very fixed view on what they want to buy, what solution they're interested in, right? Because this is something that I think in the BA world we come across quite a lot. Like someone's like, I want one of them, like help me implement one of them. And in the back of your mind, okay, yeah, we can do that. But if we do that, what will happen is we'll deliver everything you've asked for, only to discover once it's gone live that it isn't what you needed. And then quite often the blame game starts. So kind of when someone's asking for something which is technically possible, but you kind of got that instinct that, yeah, it's not going to do what they think it is. How would you handle that?
But you really do. I've said to salespeople, you really never arrive until you've walked away from a bad deal. I can't do that. I won't do that. There are people who will do this for you, but I'm not going to, because I know you're going to be unhappy. And there's more to it than what you're presenting. And I'm happy to introduce you to someone else, or I'm happy to spend a little more time making a recommendation that I think will help you more. But you've got to be willing, you got to be willing to walk away.
Yeah. And I suppose that again comes back to credibility and integrity, right? Because if you've got the reputation of being someone who will always play it straight, right? Who will always act, rather than just make the sale or influence people, will actually be thinking of their best interests, then that's going to build that credibility as well. Great. So we have a question that's come in, and do remember, feel free to type anything in the Q&A as and when it comes to your mind. And this one's an anonymous question, and it's what is key for a business analyst to sell for the customer needs, which is a very, very broad, question. But I suppose one way of interpreting that, Chris, is if you were, say, wanting to understand the needs of, say, a client or a stakeholder, but like they're not the ultimate user or consumer of the thing you're selling, right? So you might be presenting to a buying committee or whatever, but actually the people who are going to use whatever's being bought are a different set of people, and you've kind of got to try and understand their needs, but also understand the needs of the buying committee, right? So how do you approach that kind of situation?
Well, I'd like to give him credit. I'm blanking on the name, but there's a a book that said, when you're dealing with someone who's not the ultimate decision maker, the question is, if you bless this, what happens next? And then they describe the process that happens after this meeting, the sales call that you're making, thing that you're trying to get done. And you really, once you understand the players, stakeholders, and then the sales job is, can I make that presentation to them so you don't take my 40-minute presentation and boil it down into 3, say, here's what we got. Because, once somebody else takes over for you, the odds of anything good happening dwindle.
Yeah. I remember someone I used to work with, or used to know quite well, used to talk about presentations, and people would often say, could I have a copy of your slides? And they would say, I go everywhere my slides do. And I always thought that was a really great, it wasn't always a very popular answer, but it's kind of an interesting way of approaching it.
I mean, nobody's going to make your presentation with the passion that you make it.
Yeah. And conversely, they might completely misinterpret it or misrelay it. So.
And they'll definitely shorten it.
Yeah. So in your book, in the Accidental Salesperson, you talk about those kind of level 4 relationships and almost becoming an authority, like a go-to person. And there was that whole idea on the chart of an outside insider, or a trusted advisor, as we might say in the business change community. And I think that resonates really well with me. I'm sure it will with many of our listeners. I wondered if you could give some examples of tangible actions that we could take to move towards becoming that sort of go-to person.
Yes, let me just say this first. Level 4, being an outside insider. I used to say, did you get invited to your client's Christmas party? When I would get invited to people's Christmas parties, and as a salesperson, because I said, wow, I must be important, and I was the only one there that was doing what I do, and there were 10 more like me. So you've got to build a relationship, and it takes time. It takes 3, 4, 5 years before you're a household name, or a business friend, or whatever that is. But level 2 is 100% better than level 1.
Yeah.
And then having the level 3 moments where you're sending, here's a curation of an article that here's a review of a book that I just read, and here are 5 key points I took away. Here's a video I found that I think you'll really be interested in. Watch this. And you just do that. If you do that 10, 15, 20 times, you start to, work your way into people's minds. I mean, what I do now is I'm in a new town. I moved from Chicago to Chattanooga, and I don't have much of a network. I've got some friends here in broadcasting, and I know my barber, but 2-year pandemic, and just haven't really been socializing. So I've been sending my Accidental Sales Manager book out with a letter in it, and then following up about 8 days later with a phone call. And all I want to do is get a meeting, let people know I'm in town, tell them what I do, find out what they do first, tell them what I do. But the book is a great way to introduce yourself. And if you don't have a book, you've got a one sheet. You've got a Christmas card. Like, I didn't have a book. I just had a 1-page of list of things and quotes and things that I'd run across in my reading. And wow. And the thing is, in my business, professional speaker, trainer, author, but if you send something, like if you give somebody a free sample or an article or part of your book or first 2 chapters of your book, they go, wow, if he's given this away and it's this good, I wonder what would happen if I paid him. So,
yeah.
So you got to. There's that story in the book about the 3 secrets of success. And it was the guy that I met on an airplane who allegedly was Silicon Valley multimillionaire who was he had become chairman emeritus, and he was about 45 years old. And I said, and we talked for about an hour, but he said, "You want to know the secrets of success?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "You got to know what you're doing. You got to know you know what you're doing, and you got to be known for what you know." And he said, "Most people don't even know what they're doing. But when you know what you're doing, then you can repeat what you do over and over again. And you can do the same behaviors, you can apply this, and you know you're going to get some results. And then when you're known for what you know, people come to you for help and advice, not your lowest price."
Yeah.
And that is so powerful that when you become an expert in their eyes, it's a LinkedIn article, and then you link them to it. You don't just write it. You say, "Hey, I wrote this on LinkedIn. Here's a link to it." And I'm not a big LinkedIn guy, but I have, I've used it successfully. But you got to have a channel or something where you're putting some content out into it that positions you.
Yeah.
Like this. You can have a podcast. You can have a Zoom channel. YouTube channel. I'm 72 years old. I have a YouTube channel. Ridiculous. I'm just glad I didn't get into the seminar business this year, because who wants to go, get on a plane and then be with a crowd of 200 people in a ballroom for 6 hours? Nobody.
Well, maybe next, Chris, it's TikTok for you as well as I don't even know really how TikTok works, but
I have people who know how TikTok works.
That's a good way of working. It's a good way of working. So I just a slight side thought there, Chris, because you were talking about those three secrets to success, about being known for what you know and knowing what you know. And one thing I find a lot of people in sort of my line of work suffer from, although it's never really talked about, is a little bit of imposter syndrome, right? Where and I count myself in this, right? I've been doing this a long time, but I still have that feeling that you're going to get found out, that you're not as good as you're not as good as you think you are. And most salespeople I've met come across as extremely confident, very extrovert, very credible on the whole. And I wonder, I mean, do salespeople suffer from imposter syndrome, and is that a common thing? And if so, any tips?
Well, I feel like I'm a confident person and a knowledgeable person and an honest person, and it's the intention that you have when you walk into somebody's office. It's the intention. I want to help you. Selling is helping, and I can help you. And if there's no fit, we can, we'll say goodbye, shake hands and say goodbye. But I can remember, this may help, and I think it'll help. I had this brand new online course, and I was selling it to a pretty significant customer. And the trouble with being a sales trainer, selling sales training, is that everybody thinks you're going to use all kinds of techniques on them and trick them. And so for the first 20 minutes, there was just like a barrier in front, and there was nothing coming. I mean, it wasn't a good conversation. And about that 20 minutes into the meeting, this guy he sits back and he sighs and he says, "You know what, Chris? You're not too slick." And I said, "Yeah, I'm just here to help. I wasn't putting on some big facade like I do everything. You're not too slick." I think that's really what you don't want people defending against, coming on at like you're, "I'm an animal. I'm going to go get you." That's not what selling is. And in fact, there's a lot of research. You can Google introverted salespeople, and you'll find that they do very, very well. It's hard for them to make a phone call, but they don't dominate the conversation.
That's really interesting. That's really interesting, Chris. And I can imagine actually now hearing you say that actually like I like that, not too slick. It's like the show a bit of vulnerability, right? Like don't be over polished. Be prepared, but don't be over polished. To connect.
Well, and the other thing is, if you can get some, if you read Influence or Cialdini's book, it's social proof. Do you have social proof? And I mean, I used to collect seminar, they call them smile sheets. Oh, this is the best seminar I ever went to, and Chris helped me increase my, so, and you put that in your brochures. But now you can videotape a client and say, I want to tell you what Adrian did for me. And that's better than you telling people how good you are. Somebody else tell. I've even, I've done meetings where I've said to people, I know you're going to ask for references. So let's do that first. I want you to call my buddy Al Rather, and he can tell you, or I'll have him call you, and he can tell you how I've helped him.
Yeah, so, absolutely, and I think that's one thing again within the business analysis world that we don't do enough of, particularly if it's internal business analysis. Is if we think about our clients or internal clients, we don't necessarily collect enough testimonials or get that kind of social proof. So when we're dealing with part of the business that's never dealt with us before, we can say, well, actually, look, this person over in this part of the business, look at what we did for them, and and here's, almost thinking like a salesperson, right? So, which
no, and I mean, some of the best trainings I've been around is where I may go in to speak, but they'll have customers come in and talk to the salespeople too, and tell how the company's helped them, and what they appreciate about the company. So, but anytime you can get a happy customer story and share it with people, then you don't need to build all the credibility.
Yeah, you know what? It reminds me, and I've no idea who this quote is from, but it's always stuck with me, which is facts tell, stories sell.
Mm-hmm.
And I heard that probably about 10, 15 years ago, and it really resonated with me because there's, I believe, absolutely a real place for business storytelling. Like even within a business, if you're trying to convince someone, you can put an Excel spreadsheet in front of them, and if they're an actuary, then yeah, put the spreadsheet in front of them, because that's what they're going to want to see, right? But most execs, or certainly execs I work with, yeah, they want to know the data's there, but they also want the 3-minute story behind it, right? And often they want the pictures and the diagrams, and so there is that element of creating the narrative to convince people.
I mean, one of the things that I ask people in a seminar setting, or you can do it. It's not as good on Zoom, but why are you doing this besides? Why are you doing this besides the money?
Yeah.
And if you can tell people that, like I came up with 38 years ago, my partner and wife Sarah McCann, right back there, we came up with our mission statement. It was making successful people successful sooner. Because we knew that people that read the book or people that went to a session, not everybody would take it to heart, but the people who were had the drive to be successful, that would accelerate their success because they got the information sooner than they would have if they hadn't met me or attended a session.
Yeah.
And making successful people successful sooner is really, I tell a story about, here's a story. So woman comes up to me after a seminar in Iowa somewhere. She said, Mr. Lytle, thank you for my career. She took my hand and held it. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, well, I was coming to your seminar last year, and I had my resignation letter in the glove compartment, but they'd finally paid for some training for me. So I said, I'll turn the resignation letter in after the seminar. And when I got back, you had made things so clear to me that I just went out and executed. And she said, I'm making more money now than I ever thought I would. I'm making more than my old man. And she said, it's thank you. And so I spent the money from that seminar a long time ago, but I never forget that.
Yeah.
Because that's what, that's the mission, and the money comes later. Just money will happen.
Yeah. So that kind of clarity of purpose is so important. And so I mean, when we're getting towards the end of the session, Chris, but one thing I want to weave in is one final question, which is about proposals, right? And in a sales environment, you would write proposals to get the purchase order or the funding or whatever. But internally in organizations, we might write some form of request that needs to be approved internally. But I mean, do you have any quick fire tips for writing proposals that get through the noise, right? Because customers have hundreds of priorities, stakeholders have all sorts of things to be worrying about. How do you write a proposal that gets through the noise?
Well, have you already had the first meeting?
Yes.
Okay, well, tell you what I do, and it sounds a little strange, but are we at proposal stage? Yes, we're at proposal stage. What would a good proposal look like to you? And I've had people say, because I could go write a 20-page proposal, but most people want an executive summary and some financials if they've decided they want to do something. But I mean, I was out selling one time, and we had a test. It was a personality test to help pick better salespeople, and I was 95 miles away from Chicago where I lived in South Bend, Indiana. And the guys, we were going to talk training. And he says, I can't find good people. So I said, well, I've got this profile test. Will help you weed out the bad. He said, write me a proposal. And I said, and I wasn't going to drive back 95 miles, drive back 95 miles, drive back 95 miles for $1,000 deal. I said, I brought an order form. He said, okay, let's fill it out. So, and so I've heard one guy said, write a proposal. And I said, what do you want in it? He said, well, I've got to give it to my COO. I need what I'm getting. I said, so you want an invoice, right? A detailed invoice. Yeah. So you don't need a proposal, you need an invoice. And I was in Toronto one time working with the Rogers newspaper group, and this newspaper side of Rogers. And the VP of sales asked me to do a focus group with advertising agency people and business people as to what a proposal should look like. And what they said is, the agency people especially said, we take your 40-page, your 40-page proposal or your 36-page PowerPoint, and we condense it into 2 pages, and we write an executive summary and send it to the client. So don't try to overwhelm us with pages and slides. Executive summary. And the other thing is a good headline. It's not a marketing partnership between me and you or the business advisor or a partnership. It's here's how you can reduce costs in this area or retain people or whatever you're trying to do. It's all about them. The chart you can use the chart to grade every page of your proposal. Is there facts about business and justification? Is there a good headline? Have I prepared? So should always be about the customer and not your product. You'll have some level 1 pages, probably your price, and here's the details, but it needs to be about the outcomes they're looking for.
Yeah.
And here's why you'll get this outcome.
About the benefit. It comes back to that whole, the whole age-old idea of features and benefits. It's the benefits that I guess people are going to buy on, right? But that again, I suppose, comes back to engaging and understanding, people's perspectives and having built that credibility to have earned the opportunity to have the conversation and all the preparation. It all sort of feeds into that.
Yes. I mean, I had a thing. I'd give them a balance sheet, a business balance sheet. Here's some of the strengths of your business. Here's some areas for improvement. here's the strengths of what you're doing. Here's some opportunities to improve. And I would always, after I presented those, I say, do I understand your business? Because people buy because we understand them, not because we make them understand what we're doing. So do I understand what you're trying to accomplish? Yes. Well, here's a pathway forward. And here's the recommendation. Here's the schedule. Here's the payment plan. But always you should seek to understand. And before you, that's Stephen Covey, of course, before you're understood.
Yeah, so a good opportunity to just weave in a quick question from Alex here. So Alex asks, what level of visuals would you say is enough in a proposal? Are they important? So would you include, pictures, diagrams? Would it be textual, or would you include some pictures or diagrams in a proposal?
If I'm doing a stand-up meeting with a buying committee with 6 or 7 people in it, I'm going to stand up and I'm going to do a PowerPoint. But there's a whole great YouTube video, and I wish I could, death by PowerPoint is a video. So the slide should have either one sentence on it and a picture, or a picture in one sentence, but you don't want to list all these things on one slide. I used to have, like my programs now have 160 slides for a 45-minute presentation, but they go so fast, people go, boy, this is really moving. It feels like it's running because I just put one word or one sentence, one visual, and move through it really quickly instead of having a crowded slide. There's the Zen of PowerPoint book, and there's the Death by PowerPoint speech by he's a Scandinavian guy. Great stuff. But yeah, so I don't think you have to have a lot of graphics or photographs. If you have a happy client, you're going to do a testimonial or something, those always help. But you don't need a picture of the plant or the picture of the product usually. But you might, I always like people to know, here's the teams behind this. Here's what's going to happen, and here's who it's going to affect, and here's who you can call if you need something. So
sort of where it's functional and useful, but yeah, keep it light, so it's not death by bullet point or death by PowerPoint.
Shorter is better. Shorter is better than longer. And 20 minutes to present and then 40 minutes to discuss.
Definitely.
I want to just share one other quick idea.
Yeah, please.
The guy that reminds me of a young me is a guy named James Muir. And he's written a book called why don't I remember the name of his book? It's a book on closing, and his something closed. Forgive me, but his close is: does it make sense to go ahead and have this meeting, or does it make sense to go ahead and implement this? And people are, well, no, it doesn't really. Okay, well, what does make sense? And so you really haven't even tried to close the sale. You just try to ask if it makes sense to take a next step. And so what you need to do when you're selling is have, here's the step I want them to, the perfect close is the name of the book. James Muir, M-U-I-R. You have to know what you're going to ask for, and then you need a fallback position in case the client says no. And you might even have a third fallback. At this point in the process, what I like to do is have you talk to one of my happy customers and then reconvene. And does that make sense? I guess I could do that. So you get them to take the next step. And that's the important thing. Neil Rackham calls it the advance. If you didn't get the sale, did you get the next step plan, the next meeting? And is it on the prospect, and we'll call it a prospect, is it on their calendar too? Or are you having to call in and chase them down and find them and try to, I'm interested, call me next week.
Yeah.
I'd be happy to call you next week. Are you willing to work with me on a calendar basis? Can we get this on your calendar for Tuesday at 11? Because, I don't want to chase you around, and let's get it on both of our calendars. We're both busy. Let's get this planned. And I say, real prospects will put you on their calendar for a next step. Information seekers make you chase them around.
Yeah. And I guess that also that feeds into the relationship, building the credibility, building the relationship, and moving up that chart. So that leads us to just a couple of closing thoughts, really. So in sort of like 30 seconds or less, which is always a really hard question to ask, but like, if there was one biggest takeaway that you want people to take away from listening to this session today, Chris, what would it be?
Well, I love talking about the principles of persuasion, and I have a thing on the vibes that you have to give off when you're in front of an audience. And they are, I'm glad to be here. I know what I'm talking about. I love what I'm doing. And if you project that, and I hope I projected that in this Zoom call, because I always start my programs with that Brotherhood of Man song, "There's Nowhere Else on Earth That I Would Rather Be." And it's an oldie, but that's my mindset. If I'm in wherever I am, I want to be present and glad to be there. And I want people to know that I'm enjoying it. And when you're enjoying what you're doing, well, this person's really different. And there's an electricity or vibe that comes out. So important.
Definitely. And it absolutely comes across without, without any doubt, Chris. So, Chris, thank you so much for taking time to speak to us today. I'm absolutely certain that people want to stay in touch with you. How can people connect with you? How can they find out more about what you offer?
Let me just share a quick screen here. And this is my website. It's called Instant Sales Training. And if you watch this 2-minute and 37-second video, it gives my philosophy of training today. But basically, we live in an on-demand world. And the story is, when I needed to change the water filter on my new refrigerator, I didn't download the owner's manual from General Electric. I got a YouTube video and watched it for 2 minutes and went and changed the filter in my GE refrigerator. So when you're having problems with leaving a good voicemail, you can just log in and search for better voicemails and search for prospecting tips. And there's 350 knowledge bites on there, easily digestible sales ideas. The other thing, and it's a subscription of $77 a year US, but you can go download this free session. You need this presentation now more than ever, and you just sample it. So my training is even better than my pitch for the training. So I always love to have people have some free samples and then check it out that way. So have a look at instantSalesTraining.com. You can email me through the site. You can learn more about some of the other things we do. And the free, if you go to video training, you can get that free curated YouTube thing without paying anything. So I'd love to share that with you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, and I would recommend, even as I say to people tuned in, even if you don't think you're a salesperson, the more I learn about the types of things that Chris writes about, I think we really are all salespeople. So you would definitely benefit from that. And of course, the other thing to mention, Chris, is the book. I know we've mentioned it a few times, but I would, if you're tuned in, I would highly recommend getting a copy. It's available on, if you're in the UK, it's available on Amazon or US or elsewhere, and in all good bookshops. Fantastic. Well, Chris, we've reached the end of our time together. So thank you once again for taking time out. There are some really nice messages in the chat.
Good.
I just want to read one of them out to you. Nefra says, listening to Chris, the word that comes to mind is authentic, which is not always the first one that is thought of in relation to selling. So great webinar. Thank you so much. So a lot of praise coming in there. So
thank you, Nefra.
So thanks once again, Chris. Thanks also to everyone who has tuned in live. The recording will be available. I'll get it edited and up, and you'll get, if you opted in, you'll get an email within about 24 hours, probably this evening, but maybe tomorrow morning. That will go out. And don't forget, there are other BA community webinars. I try and run about one a month, all free. So do encourage your colleagues to to sign up for those as well, and you get to meet people like Chris and others, and see topics that are perhaps a bit different from the usual business analysis topics. So thank you everyone for attending. Thanks again, Chris. Enjoy your afternoon, I suppose it is for you, and everyone else enjoy the rest of your day. Hope to see you again soon. So bye for now.